So, I'm gonna be totally honest, I didn't even expect to be dropping a video outside of the ones I have scheduled for quite a while. Hell, even while I was making this video, I am working on scripts for 4 other videos, not including the one I just dropped a couple days ago, getting the footage for my Kingdom Hearts videos, and sorting out stuff for my first ever collab video. Yeah, I'm a workaholic, sorry if you couldn't tell that. At most, I would have probably just made a goofy short or something to keep me in the algorithm a bit more due to YouTube being, YouTube. But then, something crazy happened. And I mean, really crazy. It was revealed that through some good old Twitter investigation that Atlus may or may not have a Persona 3 remake in the works. And honestly, if this is true and just not some bullshit, I admit I'm super excited. I'm a very big fan of the first Persona 3. It being the first ever Persona game that I beat completely, and have always enjoyed both its story and its characters, finding them to be very well done and some of the best that Atlus has put out. But I also realized that out of all of the modern day Persona games, this is the one that I believe needs a remake the most. Especially since the portable version, how about we just say it's not a great representation of improving on your flaws. So I figured I'd tackle several of those things in a video. Now for things like visuals or storytelling is going to be very minor and it'll wait to the end, as I have maybe like 1 or 2 things that I think need changing. And I don't give a shit about visuals, so I'm not wasting a spot dedicated to them. Alongside considering Persona 5, I think I can trust them with the visuals. This is just the main things that need some fine tuning. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. So I figured to start this off, I decided it would be best to focus on what might need the single most important set of improvements, and that is the combat of Persona 3. Now before I get into the major points, I will say that the core of the combat by itself is pretty good, but it is still very flawed. So how do they improve upon that? Well, for one, no more uncontrollable party members. That was easily the worst aspect of Persona 3 to me. Being unable to control party members in a fucking turn-based RPG is beyond frustrating. And if I'm being honest, I wouldn't bitch about it so hard if the AI wasn't total bullshit and constantly made every stupid decision it could in the book to screw you over. I'm looking at you and your fucking Marin Karens, Mitsuru. Don't even try to hide that you didn't pull that shit. This is something that I think the remake should focus on the most, either by giving you the option to have complete control over your team's decisions, or if they don't want to do that for some reason and just stay as faithful as possible to the source material, then I beg of them to improve the teammates' AI to be able to understand what they need to do when they need to do it, instead of just picking some random tactic and praying to our Lord and Savior RN Jesus for something to happen. Alongside this, I believe they should add in more attacks from the SMT games. Similar to how Persona 5 added back in Curse, Bless, and Gun damage, Persona 3 should add in things like Blast and Aqua damage. That way, players could experiment with more attacks and combos. They could also add in some new Personas to unlock with this. That way they don't have to completely rebuild the level up abilities and offer people more Personas to fight with. And with more Personas, they could create more fusion spells, giving the player more variety to strike down the many shadows that you'll fight in the game. There are a few other things, but at the core, those are the things that I think need the most changing. Nothing else is too horrible for words and can easily just be, and if I had talked about them, this section would be way longer than necessary, so we're just gonna move on to something else. Something that I really think needs more improvement as well. Alright, let's get to the other part of this game, the life simulation sections of Persona 3. So Persona 3 was the first ever Persona game to include what is now one of its most famous aspects, the social link side stories that are dedicated to fleshing out both your party members and several of the side characters you either meet through story or explore in the many areas on the map. While progressing through them, you bond with your newfound friends and rank up your social stats. And what do you get for this? Well, outside of unlocking some pretty powerful personas, the most you just get is extra experiments whenever you fuse them. Not a horrible reward, sure, but with how long it can take to reach rank 10 with certain characters, mainly the female party members due to you for some reason needing to max out a certain stat to even start their social links, after a while you just start to get annoyed by how little you're getting out of this. Persona 4 improved on this by adding in a few special unlocks throughout your social link journey, but it wasn't really until 5 that they had really started to add several unlocks to your arsenal in order to increase your experience with the gameplay. And I think that is what the Persona 3 remake needs to lean into. Now, they don't need to go so hard into it that it just feels like a copy of Persona 5, but I would like to see social links have more of an effect on your gameplay than just giving you some extra experience. Here's an example. Imagine that raising your social link with Tanaka, the shady businessman that you meet at the mall, allowed you to get lower prices from the shop so you could buy items, weapons, and accessories a bit easier. Hell, another good one would be like when you form a bond with Kenji, the laid-back MILF hunter. Maybe you gain unlocks to make your stats grow a bit faster. Adding on little rewards like that makes going through the social links so rewarding. And since we're still on the topic of social links, how about we talk about the relationships next? So, Persona 3, while at the same time introduced the social link system, also introduced the mechanic of starting romantic relationships. And boy, did these things need more time in the oven. Now, the romances weren't exactly bad, except for one that we'll get to later, but they certainly had some faults. For one, the romances themselves. Now, I'm not gonna say that the romances were horrible, but they just feel very on rails. Something I think Persona has definitely gotten better at, but still hasn't fully gotten away from. It doesn't help that picking the wrong answer in some conversations can end up souring your relationship and basically stagnating all the progress you put into this just basically to a halt. It gets irritating. It also doesn't exactly help that you can't really say no to any of the romantic options, a problem that can become very apparent if you just don't want to romance them. Example, imagine if you want to only romance, let's say, Yukari, but you don't want to romance Fuka. Well, too bad, buddy. You're gonna have to romance both of them whether you like it or not. People talk a lot about how Kawakami and other adults are romance options in Persona 5 and it's weird, but at the very least you can still just reject them. Hell, the game will even go as far as to call you out for dating multiple women at the end of it. They beat the shit out of you. Here, you just gotta accept the fact you're building a harem and there's nothing you can do about it. And it is definitely, without a doubt, at its worst in the portable version, where, I'm gonna blow your mind if you've never touched it before, you romance a child. I'm being serious, I'm not even joking. In this game, in order to 100% the game, you have to romance Ken. They didn't add in the option to make him like a little brother figure or anything. You just romance this 10-year-old. And from what I remember, you're like 17 in this game. The fact they thought this was okay was really awkward, especially considering that the age of consent is 13 in Japan back then. It's 16 now, but back then it was 13, and that still wasn't the age of consent. He was 10 in this game. It's so fucking weird. And it's one of the most awkward moments I've ever had to deal with in any game ever. It makes going back to play the female route really uncomfortable to 100% and just downright unnerving. If this supposed remake is real, I'm hoping the remake not only adds in the option to say no, but it also changes Ken's route to being non-romantic. And if they just don't want to, at least make him older so it isn't as creepy. Make him like 14 at least. That way there's not like that massive enough of a gauge gap. 3-year difference is fine. Don't make it 7. Okay, so originally I was going to dedicate the first part of this section to things like weapons and armor, but honestly, I don't really think I need to. Persona 3 actually does a pretty fantastic job of balancing all of its weapons and armor. The weapons you buy from shops and find in Tartarus feel very balanced, both in a way that feels like they can be useful in combat scenarios as an alternative to just spamming a persona, but at the same time, you are also able to feel like there's something missing from the combat experience that can only be solved with fusions, and the fusion weapons feel very satisfying to use. They're like a genuine reward for exploring all of the game's mechanics. The only thing I guess I could say is add in more fusion weapons so players can create more crazy ass weapons to use in combat. The same also goes for the armor, for the reasons I stated above. That's pretty much the only thing I can think of. So I'm going to talk about the other side of equipment, aka the accessories. Now, in comparison to the weapons and armor that feel incredibly well balanced in terms of power and resourcefulness, accessories, wow, some of these are just busted as all hell, and the biggest example of them all are the late game ring items you can get. Now, there are items that you can obtain mid-game that give you resistances to elemental weaknesses. You know, it sounds simple enough, gives you more of a chance of dealing with the dangers of weaknesses just fucking over your team. But once you get to late game, you can start obtaining items that just straight up fully nullify weaknesses in their entirety. Meaning, almost every ounce of challenge is ripped away from the game as characters no longer have to worry about weaknesses hitting them. And these aren't unlocked from some kind of crazy difficult trial you have to overcome or doing one of Elizabeth's requests. They're just, you just buy them at the store. I'm not even joking, like just at the end of the game you can just buy these things and you're given full nullification. And I don't get why. What do these game-breaking items become so easy to obtain? It's just a baffling design choice. I remember just trying this out in the final boss and making it through like 90% of the fight with little to no trouble whatsoever. If this remake is actually real and not just some misread, then they definitely need to do something about these broken accessories that you can just get easy peasy. Hopefully they're placed behind some kind of new trial added to the game, or maybe they're added as a new form of Elizabeth request. Hell, climbing onto the challenge stuff I said before, you could probably introduce some battle challenges, where the better you do, the better the reward. Something to make unlocking these broken items feel like it was a culmination of hard work, instead of just finding them while shopping at the mall. Alright, so this one is pretty straightforward on what needs to be improved, and that is the level design, cause good god, these dungeons are pretty boring. There are some ideas that I think are really cool, like a subway that you have to fight your way through so you can stop it before it crashes, or the underground war tunnels that you explore to battle a giant possessed shadow tank thing. But in the end, once you play through them again, you notice that they're just subways and tunnels with a color filter over them. Hell, the tunnels don't even have a color filter over them. It just makes them pretty unmemorable, to be honest. Which is a stark contrast to Tartarus, which is incredibly memorable due to how well designed and unique it is as a dungeon. It's also well used within the story. I'd even argue it's better used than most dungeons in the entire Persona franchise. As a result, it makes every other level stand out, and not exactly in a good way. So for the remake, I'm hoping that they add a lot more flair in order to up these dungeons in memorability. Things like improved layouts, more stylization, and more rooms to explore. And if they really don't want to do that, either through wanting to preserve the original or just not really caring about changing them at all, I hope they at least add in things to make them more aesthetically pleasing. Like different kinds of shading, maybe making the areas look a little more grimy and grotesque. Something to really just make them pop more. But who knows, Atlas has always been hard to figure it out when it comes to games, and I'm just some doofus who likes talking about video games in hopes of getting subs and likes. Did that convince you to do that? No? Okay. Anyways, I've been rambling on about this. Let's get on to the last part of all of this. So originally, I was actually going to start off this whole video with me talking about the story. But to be totally honest, I have little to no complaints about the story in Persona 3. It's dark, well-paced, filled with great twists, and wraps up nicely in a grim but beautiful finale that I'm pretty sure we can all admit to sobbing like babies over. So what exactly is the point of this section? Well, I do think the story is absolutely fantastic. There are two things that I think need some improvement. First and foremost is Ken. Ken's whole story is about how he's hunting the person who killed his mother in order to enact revenge. It's an interesting storyline that's not super focused on, surprisingly. Like, you get a couple moments in the storyline itself, but it kind of crashes with the execution when you realize how little time you spend with Ken as a character. You are barely given any time to grow attached to him as a character and feel the struggles he went through. that by the time it's revealed his mother died because of Shinjiro, you just kind of go, oh shit, that's kind of sad, and then just go back to not caring in the slightest. Hell, the reveal of Shinjiro is dying has more of an emotional effect on you due to one main reason. The crew at Atlas actually made you care about Shinjiro due to writing in his struggles with the cast and his own internal struggles in the story. But Ken's whole arc is literally him just muttering under his breath about shit you don't care about, since the game barely focuses on him at all. Here's hoping the supposed remake reworks his storyline into being more involved with the ongoing narratives. So we are, actually caring when the big twist is revealed, instead of just easily putting it together and never getting any time to focus on him, so he just shows up and actively kills one of your fucking party members. Okay, now let's focus on Strega. Now compared to Ken, Strega is actually nowhere near as misused. They are written well and are very well used in the story as a whole, both as villains and as characters. But there is one thing I'd like them to work on, and it's how they barely try to intervene in the Persona user's journey. Most of the time they show up either to just shit talk you or just fuck with you in ways outside of combat. It would be nice if the remake gave you a few more moments where you actually fought the Strega members a couple extra times. I don't want there to be a fight like every fucking full moon or something, that would just get tedious and repetitive. But I would like moments where you confront them in maybe 1 or 2 boss fights, or even have them meet outside of the Dark Hour to sort of have the main character kind of clash with their ideals. I think that'd be cool. Give them more of a presence outside the Dark Hour. Granted, I don't think it's something that needs as much focus as Ken's does, but I'm hoping the crew at Atlas gives us a bit more time with them, both in fights and as characters. And with that section done, that's pretty much everything. I'm still not fully sure if this remake is 100% confirmed, but if it actually is real, and I'm really hoping some of this stuff gets tackled. I doubt it, considering I'm a really small channel, and Atlas doesn't really listen to a lot of fan feedback from what I understand. But here's hoping that maybe, just maybe, 1 or 2 of these points can reach them. Thank you all for watching this, everyone. I'm glad I could get my thoughts out about this remake stuff. And if you liked this, do me a favor and hit those like and sub buttons. And also, if there's anything you think should be changed with this remake or just kept, let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat with you. Have a lovely day, everyone, and I'll see you next time.